The LA District Attorney wants the Menendez brothers out of prison. We're going to talk about all the things that he's saying, all the press conferences, all the media releases in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. The sofa's still missing, but it's here in spirit. Don't worry, it's going to be back soon. I'll be back home soon. My name's Paul if you are new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel, well, my name's Paul too. Just in case you might have forgotten, or the guy with the couch and the dogs, right? Anyways, what we're going to be doing today is another Menendez brothers update story, not whatever you want to call it. What I wanted to specifically do today is talk about the Los Angeles District Attorney who's heading up like the, hey, let's get the brothers out, let's do that, let's do this. One thing that I have found that's been very interesting, so today the video dropped that I did on the Netflix documentary, and that has been watching, like reading the comments and all the different opinions and stuff like that. I definitely at this point, even just 30 minutes into reading comments, I want to go back over the trial and watch that verbatim. I obviously saw it growing up or whatever, like I lived through this, but I didn't watch it verbatim. And so seeing so much of the stuff coming through, I'm like, interesting. I don't remember that or didn't know that or whatever. So I'm going to be doing that at some point. I don't know how I'll do it. I don't know if we'll do it on live stream on the other channel or what, but just be prepared, okay? So what we're going to do for this specific video is we're going to focus on, like I said, the LA District Attorney, and we'll talk a little bit about him first, and then we're going to watch some of the media clips from his press conference. We're going to read a couple of news articles, and then we're going to read his letters of support for clemency. And that's it. I'll do a separate video that kind of is reviewing like what the family's saying now and all those kind of things, because most of the family and people seem to support him. He does have an uncle, or I'm sorry, not he, but they do have an uncle that's like, nope, absolutely not, don't support it, you know, and so that's kind of reflective of, I would say, the public's opinion as well. So that's it. If you are familiar with the channel, then you'll know my little spiel I'm about to say. And if you're not, well, I always like to say this. I am not an attorney. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a cop. I'm not any of that fancy credential stuff. Oh, only credentials we got up in here is an invisible sofa, some sass, and some self-diagnosed personality disorders on my behalf. Okay. So just know that these are just my opinions on very public information. I encourage you to share your opinions down below as well. Just be nice to each other. You know, like Christina Randall says, you know, just be kind to each other down there. And that's it. So let's go ahead and talk about the LA District Attorney first. I'm going to put a little thing up here on the screen just to kind of go over very basic who this man is, right? Now you'll see on the screen here, it says his name is George Gascon, and let's just read what the little thing says. Okay, so here we see District Attorney George Gascon, a former beat cop assistant chief on the law of the Los Angeles Police Department, and elected district attorney. George Gascon's 40-year career in law enforcement has taken him from the streets of LA to the highest ranks of law enforcement and to the courtroom. No one has more experience making our neighborhood safe and working with our diverse communities. Now, one thing that is prevalent in this little press conference, I didn't pull the clips out of that part, but it's a public sentiment, and not everybody, of course, or whatnot, but you'll hear one of the reporters going on about this, or I don't know if you'll hear him in the clips I pulled, but it was going on. Is this a bid? Like, is this all political for re-election, right? Is this just a facade? Like, what's the real tea here, okay? So that is a theme, and not just here with this reporter. Obviously, this is something that people are bringing up and whatnot, so that is a dynamic of this. Now, I'm not trying to accuse him of doing that. I'm just stating what I've seen, okay? It's part of the narrative that's going on of people being like, well, why now? And that kind of question, specifically with his motivations. But we'll let him speak for himself. And on that note, let's get the first clip up. Again, this is George. He's speaking at a press conference. This is one of the first ones he did. Now, again, we're kind of traveling in time. So this is the conference he did before the clemency stuff, okay? So let's get into the first one.
I want to also introduce some other people that are here with me, and I hope I'm pronouncing the names right because I've seen handwritten part of it. But I have Ana Maria Barat, José Menendez, José Menendez and niece Karen Bender Mullen, and Kitty's niece. They're all here with us. Also with us here is Brock Lunsford. He's the assistant head deputy for the post-litigation conviction unit. and Nancy Cervier, who is the Deputy District Attorney in charge of the Resentencing Unit.
Now, here you see he's describing it already there. And like I said, I wanted to put this up here so you can just get an idea if you're new to this case and whatnot, or the updates and whatnot's going on of, the family's out there to support. You have all these people. Now, he will say, and within his own office, that there are people that are like, we ain't, nope. We ain't with you on this one. Leave him in prison, right? So he's very open about that. We'll hear those clips come up. Now, at the end of this press conference, his family members will speak out. But like I said, we're going to do that in a separate video because there's multiple people I want to kind of cover, like jurors, people like that and whatnot. They're speaking out. But I just wanted to show that those are the people who are standing around him. Let's get to the next clip.
Let me begin by telling you that this is a case where we've had many people in this office spend a great deal of time reviewing the case. I have to tell you unequivocally that we don't have a universal agreement. There are people in the office that strongly believe that the Menendez brothers should stay in prison the rest of their life, and they do not believe that they were molested. And there are people in the office that strongly believe that they should be released immediately and that they were in fact molested.
Okay, now this right here, completely from my perspective, from my sofa perspective, represents the public as well, okay? It's like down the middle. It's like literally depending on who you talk to. I believe them, I don't believe them, or I believe them that they should still be in prison, or I believe them and they should get out. Like, it's a mixed bag, okay? And this is one of the things that I brought up in my last video where I was like, okay, like and again, these are different cases, so I'm not trying to lump and just say like, oh, anyone in this is all the same, because when you're dealing with cases and crimes and abuse and things like, it's like a fingerprint, right? It's all very different, all very unique. And so there is that. So don't think that I'm trying to lump this in. But when you look at the Gypsy Rose situation that just took place, right? There's this huge, massive, get her out of prison. Oh my God, oh my God. And then almost within weeks, it was like, put her back in prison. She's this horrible human being. And so that's a question that I raised with this case. It's like, okay, so, we're going to hear the reasons that the DA is citing that for him personally, he thinks the brothers should be let out, this, that, and the other. But what happens if they get out and obviously if they did something of the same caliber, right? I mean, come on, let's pray that won't happen. I don't think it will. But they do the slightest little thing that the public doesn't agree with, and not even like on this level, right? But just like something basic. Is the public opinion going to immediately be like, oh my God, put him back, we were wrong, that kind of a thing? It's almost like these cases end up getting treated like a game show at times, right? And you're just like, okay, like where are we at today with it? You know what I'm saying? So, but again, a lot of what I see with this case depends on a person's viewpoint and life experiences of what they have experienced themselves or gone through and that type thing. So I think it's interesting that he's being very upfront of, hey, there's some people that I work with, they don't believe this, right? A lot of people don't. A lot of people think it's made up. I personally believe their story about it. I also, at the same time, I'm somebody who two things can be true at once. I think what they did is absolutely heinous, like completely. It was a violent, premeditated crime, and he'll speak to this, and say, we'll hear the clip, but he'll say, this was not manslaughter. Like, these guys premeditated this. You can't get around that, right? Now that is where you begin to look through the lens of like, okay, well, if all they said was true, what kind of a mindset were they really in? So let's continue for now.
I have to tell you that after a very careful review of all the arguments that were made for people on both sides of this equation, I came to a place where I believe that under the law, resentencing is appropriate, and I am going to recommend that to a court tomorrow.
So now it was major bombshell, not in a negative way, but just like, whoa, the DA is going to recommend the resentencing, right? He'll get into more of the details with it. And obviously now, as we know, like this is like a little bit outdated here if you've been following it, because they're doing other things as well. Now we do have that resentencing date. It is December 11th. So it's kind of right around the corner. Now the clemency thing, that goes from, that could, speed things up drastically, right? I don't know if the governor would, grant that, okay? That's major, right? Even no matter how one might feel, I mean, this is where you get political, okay? Because it's like, this would be major to let someone out that had done something like this, regardless of the circumstances surrounding it. And I'm talking about like the abuse and things like that. So for a governor to do it, right, that's where I'm like, we'll see, right? But I mean, you never know. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's get on to that next clip, though.
What that means in this particular case is that we're going to recommend to the court that the life without the possibility of parole be removed and that they would be sentenced for murder, which, because there are 2 murders involved, that would be 50 years to life. However, because of their age, under the law, since they were under 26 years of age at the time that these crimes occurred, they would be eligible for parole immediately.
So there you go. And I have a feeling if that's the way it goes, like they don't get clemency and this is what takes place, they're going to get paroled, right? I mean, I personally think they're going to get out. I think when you have this many people, and I'm not just saying the public, but obviously you have the public, but people, family members, the DA, people like this coming out and saying like, I think they should be out. All right. It's kind of like Gypsy Rose when she got, out on parole or whatever. Shy of messing up really bad, it was like she's going to get it, okay? Now, nothing's ever a done deal, especially in the justice system. You never know which way that's going to go, but that's how I think it'll play out.
The reason why I'm here today and why I came in front of all of you about 10 days ago is because there was a more recent documentary about the case that again brought a tremendous amount of public attention. And we know there have been other documentaries, so this is not the first, this is the more recent one. And frankly, our office got flooded with requests for information. And even though this case was already scheduled to be heard in late November, I decided to move this forward because, quite frankly, we did not have enough resources to handle all the requests. And one of the things that I thrive to do in this office is to be very transparent in everything that we do.
Now, I thought that part was interesting. And I mean, like he said, obviously we know the recent documentary. I just did a video on it. Oh, I mean, you just type in the Menendez brothers and it's like, well, which one do you want to watch over the years, right? And each one has like a different narrative. Like you can literally watch 5 Menendez brothers documentaries and walk away from each one with a different feeling, okay? This is what makes these cases so complicated. But I also thought it was interesting that he was like, we don't have the manpower to handle this, okay? Like we can't handle this. Can you imagine how many people flooded that in? Because I remember when like a resurgence in this case started taking place, and it was a while ago. It obviously not as huge as it is now, but when it was building momentum, and I was like, oh, what? Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, you bring it into your peripheral, and I was like, what, people want the Menendez brothers out? Like, what? Like, And that's when I started paying attention to it again and looking at stuff, and I was like, oh, well, wait a minute. Like, I didn't know A, I didn't know B, I didn't know C. Not an expert, right? Still going through all of it. But again, I just thought it was interesting that he admitted that, and I do like that he says he wants everything to be very transparent. Okay, I think that is very important. Let's keep going.
In this case, we review the prison files. And you have to understand that the way the process works, when you're talking about a resentencing under the law, it really focuses not necessarily on what the original crimes were, but it focuses on, has the person been rehabilitated, number one, and number two, can they be released safely into the community? And
this is so true right here. I mean, with the resentencing, things of this nature, that's the key element. Can we let them out and they're not going to kill somebody again, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that's the main thing there. Again, when you look at these cases and these different, people of this magnitude, okay, I'm talking about major over-the-top cases. Gypsy Rose, Menendez brothers, the Manson girls, you name it, things that have some kind of like volatile thing. And then any case or whatever, right? You want to make sure the person's not going to get out and reoffend. Now, he'll give some statistics, and the statistics, I can't say that word, are pretty favorable, meaning like this is the percentage of people who reoffended, okay? Now, this is obviously specifically for him and whatnot. This doesn't account for maybe, some state over here or whatever. So that's the nightmare, because we do hear about those, right? Where you see somebody getting out and you're like, number one, like what you let this person out in the first place? You know what I mean? And then you're surprised that they killed 5 more people? Huh? Right? Nobody wants that to happen, number one, but especially when you get into these elected officials and whatnot. That's why I feel like with the governor, I'm like, we'll see if he does the clemency thing, right? I don't know about all that. Let's keep going.
Under that rubric, since I've been in office, we have resentenced over 300 people, including 28 for murder. Only 4 have reoffended. If that was a regular recidivism rate in this country, we would be the safest nation in the world, but we know that it's not. In fact, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that go to prison reoffend and get rearrested. And that's why we have so many problems.
I mean, sadly, this is true. And especially when you're dealing, again, with this caliber of crime and whatnot, you have to be very careful, right? Because it's one thing when you're talking about reoffending of, I went out and robbed another store, which that's not good either, I'm not trying to say. But, I went out and killed 5 more people or did blank to little kids or whatever the case is, like, we're not looking for that to happen with anybody, okay? And one thing, and this is a whole other topic or whatever, but prisons aren't really made, I mean, they are and they aren't for rehabilitation. It's almost like depending on a person's circumstances and whatnot. So that's where it really comes down to what was done while in prison, what kind of rehabilitation do we see. And we're going to hear him talk about how he feels very confident with the things that the brothers have accomplished behind bars. Now, yes, there's the other argument of, well, what else were they going to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like they're bored, right? And he'll say, they didn't join gangs, they didn't do this. Can you see these 2 dudes joining the gang? I mean, you never know, right? Okay? You never know. So there's that argument too. I try and look at it on both sides, but I'm like, well, of course they're going to do that. Like, there's nothing else to do, right? And maybe they could have gone down another path. I mean, I don't know. I just try and look at it from both sides of the fence. But if you look at some of these other countries where prisons are more like, let's truly try and rehabilitate the person, it's a little bit different. But, we're not talking about other places, we're talking about here.
However, when you look at the case of the Menendez brothers, you see 2 very young people. One was 19 and the other one was 21 when they committed these horrible acts. And I want to underline, they were horrible acts. There is no excuse for murder, and I will never imply that what we're doing here is to excuse that behavior, because even if you get abused, the right path is to call the police, seek help. But I understand also how sometimes people get desperate. We often see women, for instance, that have been battered for years, and sometimes they will murder their abuser out of desperation.
Now, Sarah Boone would have you think that he just was talking about her, right? If you follow me for Sarah Boone, you know what I'm talking about. So, again, I like that he brings this up, right? Because you can't deny that. There's aspects of the case that, in looking at the totality of it, you do have to question, right? And the brutality of it, the premeditation of it, things of this nature. Again, I'm not trying to excuse it away either way, or to be like, oh, well, you know what, this, that, or the other, or, oh, well, it's okay now, or every one of these is different. And so with me looking back through it with a different lens on now, I go both ways. I was just reading the comment section over here on the other video, and somebody said it perfectly. They're like, I'm very Switzerland on this case, and she goes on to list her things, and I was like, that's a good way to say that, because it's just, this is such a complicated situation, and again, it's just at the root of it is the belief, do you believe that their story, essentially? And then from there, okay, what are the nuances of all this, right? So if we're going on the basis of this is true and they acted out in this way, I feel like the brutality of it, and again, this is just me, sofa speculation, not a therapist, that kind of thing. I feel like the brutality of it represents the anger and rage over the abuse. And again, that's in the assumption that what they say is true. Okay. I feel like if it was a greedy thing, like oh man, we just want their money, I feel like it maybe would have been a little bit different. Like still violent. I'm not trying to say, oh, only one gunshot. You know what I mean? Like it's not that at all. No matter what, it's still horrible. But I felt like this was almost like a rage, like that kind of thing. Like it was so personal, right? How many bullets there were and whatnot, how many gunshots there were. So, but again, do I know them? No. Was I there? No. Was I on the jury? No. You know what I'm saying? I don't know any of this. I'm nobody, right? But I'm glad that the DA is bringing these aspects up, because I feel like you have to look at all different angles of this.
And I do believe that the brothers were subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. But they went to prison for life without the possibility of parole, which meant that certainly under the law at that time, they had no hopes of ever getting out. They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to live the life of the person.
And that's what I was referring to earlier, where he brings this up. And again, I'm like, maybe they could have. I don't see them in any of those gangs, but you know, whatever. But they have done a lot. I'm not trying to just negate the accomplishments they've made behind bars. And again, you can tell me, he says right here, he believes that they suffered this extreme, you know, situation in the home. The prosecutor in the Netflix documentary says she couldn't find anybody to say anything good about their father, right? So I'm just like, well, if that's how he acted publicly, what was going on behind the scenes? We have family members in here saying like, yeah, this torrid stuff was going on. Now, again, another argument I see is like, well, a lot of people go through that and they don't put, you know, numerous shotgun shells in their parents. And this is true. This is very true. A lot of people do this and they don't go blow all their parents' money afterward. This is true. You know, all of these things are true. And I think this, again, I'll say it a million times while like going over this case. This is a situation where multiple things have to be true at once. And that's how life is, right? I feel like with social media and the internet these days, we've fallen into this thing where it's like one or the other, 0 or 100, black or white, no context, soundbite, like that kind of a thing. And so I feel like we've stepped away from, at least on the internet, maybe not so much in real life, of looking at the entire picture, you know. And again, we'll see what happens, right? They might not get out. To me, it speaks very highly that the family is wanting them out this much. Now, I've also seen people talking about, well, when this first happened, the family didn't want them out, they didn't believe them, whatever. You know, maybe they've come to terms with it. You know what I'm saying? Like they've seen this other evidence, they've put the pieces together, they've all talked, whatever the case is, right? Maybe other people behind the scenes in the family, and again, this is speculation, I don't know, and I'm not attaching this to anybody, but like, what if by the brothers coming out, somebody else in the family was like, you know what, he did this to me too, or so-and-so did this, but I don't want myself out there like that. I mean, you never know.
Less usual, I guess, when people not only do that, but they also begin to engage in ways to make life for others better. And in this case, the brothers have been doing so for a very long time, creating groups to deal with how to address untreated trauma, creating groups to deal with other inmates that have physical disabilities and may be treated differently. Even in one case, Lyle negotiating for other inmates as to the conditions that they live under during prison.
Now, a couple of thoughts come up to me when watching this clip here. Number one is looking at a full circle. Now, again, I didn't know these dudes or whatever, still don't, but didn't know them back then for sure. So it's interesting to hear how empathetic they seem to have become versus what I imagine they might have been like before. And I'm mostly speaking like of Lyle, because Erik seems like he was always more a little bit like of the follower, the feeler or whatever, and Lyle was kind of more like his dad, more of like the, you know, aggressor, abuser and that kind of thing, not in a violent way, but just you see how we kind of played out, like the follower and the leader. And so it's interesting to hear of maybe like some empathy and whatnot was gleaned over the years and everything. You heard the prosecutor describe them as, they were just like lumps on a log. Yeah, they didn't mean anything to me. They were just like these dumb jocks. So to go about that change, I think would be great if that's authentic and if that's how it really went down. So I would be curious to see, okay, does that same energy still come about when they're out and whatnot? Now, another thing that also comes to mind is almost like the spokesperson thing, right? I think, and I'm now going over to Gypsy Rose, I think a lot of people wanted her to be the spokesperson for something besides like Instagram photographs and stuff like that, right? And I think when she came out, it was just kind of like, no, I'm like gonna chill, you know what I'm saying? People didn't like that, and so I wonder if this will go this way too with them. Now the difference here is like Gypsy Rose wasn't doing any of that behind bars, to my knowledge at least. The guy seemed to have kind of done a lot of good behind bars and whatnot, and spoken out. And I think one of the things that is good that has come from this is them speaking out on some of these topics specifically related to men. Like I've said before, especially at the time of this crime, like men didn't speak of stuff like this being done to them. Still don't, right? Men don't talk about being depressed. Men don't talk about being sad. Men don't talk about getting SA'd. These are very taboo type things, right? And so to have spokesmodels or spokespersons or whatever, somebody like being like, hey, look, you know what? I'm willing to talk about this that happened to me. And that arena, I think, is very powerful. And especially if they're able to do that behind bars in such a hyper masculine environment where it's, the survival of the fittest and that type thing. I mean, I think that's brave.
I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board, and if the parole concurs with my assessment, and it will be their decision, they will be released accordingly. I must underline, however, this case will be filed in court tomorrow. The final decision will be made by the judge. Court has to agree with my conclusion that they deserve to be resentenced.
Now, can you imagine after all that, the court was like, you know what I'm saying? Everybody'd be like, what? They could. I mean, you never know. I personally don't think they will. This is how I think it's going to go down. I probably already said this, but I'll say it again since he's talking specifically about this. I don't think that the governor is going to give them clemency. If by the time you see this he has, I'll take the L, right? I just can't imagine, okay? I think that they'll get paroled under strict parole. Because here's the thing. Like, it would almost behoove everyone in the situation to do some kind of a parole scenario of checking in, almost like with Gypsy Rose, where it's just like, you've been incarcerated for 30 some years, right? It's just like you never know. I mean, you never know. And so I think when you get to the political side of it, the CYA side of it, it would benefit the powers that be to have that there. Now, I don't know if clemency comes with parole. I don't know how that works, but I could see that that's the route they go for that reason.
We certainly feel we're very sure not only that the brothers have rehabilitated and that they will be safe to be reintegrated in our society, but that they have paid their dues, not only for the crimes that they committed, but because of all the other things they have done to improve the life of so many others.
Now, again, this is just kind of recapping what he's saying. They've done this stuff to improve the lives of others. You can follow them on Facebook and whatnot. They're on there. They're Justice for the MenendezBrothers.org and kind of see all the stuff they've been working on and whatnot. Now, again, the DA sitting here saying, like, I feel confident that they have rehabilitated themselves. Okay. Now, again, I sit here and say this, I would be curious to know, and he did, he gives the numbers out about people that have been paroled and whatnot, when you sit here and see famous cases like this and they get paroled out, but then you hear of Joe Blow You know what I'm saying? Still behind bars for whatever, not getting the same chance because the public hasn't taken an interest. It's almost like, well, that's not fair. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, let everybody out, but it's almost like, you know what, this needs to be, if we're going to start like looking at things like this, then we need to like look at all the cases, not just because, you know, the public blew his phone up over the Menendez brothers, right? Now, another thing that I saw somebody say in the comment section, and again, I'm just kind of going off memory here, was basically talking about like, look, it becomes a slippery slope when it's talking about situations like, you know, where I killed my abuser, or I came home and found the neighbor doing ABC to my child and took him out. Vigilante type stuff, whatever you want to call it, right? And I get that. And so that's where all these very, you know, layered complications come into these cases like this. And again, it's like I say, what's so interesting about, if you want to call it true crime or the judicial system, whatever, each of these cases is like a fingerprint. Not one is the same. You can't apply the same thing to it. But I often feel like the judicial system is set up that way to be like, you know, almost like minimum mandatories, right? Where it's like one size fits all, and it's like, but that's not how that works, right? Now, granted, I get that there's some scenarios where it's like, you know, what, they only got that for that? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So it works out that way. But again, I just feel like they're all very different. And I feel like if the DA is in here saying like, I'm pretty confident, it's like, well, buddy, I hope you are, right? Because if they get out and they do some next level stuff, he ain't going to be DA for long. Okay.
So again, we will be filing for resentencing tomorrow. We're seeking that they would be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, as opposed to life without the possibility of parole, which is they currently have. That means that they would have 50 years to life because there were 2 murders. But because of the age upon which they were convicted, under 26, under current law, that means they're eligible for youthful parole.
Now, here's one thing I was just thinking about watching that clip is when you do a couple of things. First of all, when you do life without parole, right? And again, if you follow, you've been here following me for years, you've been following true crime, some of these cases, it's like, oh no, that's highly appropriate, right? And again, I do take their age into factor a little bit, but also, I mean, they're still grown up, right? But another thing that's really, really big to me with this is when looking at these scenarios like this of, you know, okay, we're going to file this, you know, they should be able to have this chance and you know, that kind of a thing. You know, I do feel like there's a level of being like, everyone should be looked at, even if it's like not in the context of parole, but almost like a, let's review this case and whatever it is, like if it's life, like in 25 years we're going to review this no matter what and see if has new evidence come out, has something changed, have we retroacted those laws? Not to say that murder charges would get retroactive, but you know what I'm saying. Now, another thing that comes to my mind with this is this, and imagine the scenario of what do you think would happen in this particular case, this specific one, same energy, same things, documentaries come out, but every one of the Menendez family members were like, absolutely do not let them out. We do not support them. We do not believe them. Do not let them out. Do you think the DA would still be saying, let's let him out, or do you think it would be different? Because I feel like the fact that the family, now remember, not all the family, I'm not speaking for all of them, and again, I don't know these people. I am nobody. I'm just sitting here in a room with a camera talking to it like a crazy person. So I don't know these people, so I can't speak for them. But I feel like if the whole family was like, oh no, this would not be happening, right? I think that's a huge contributing factor, and I'm curious to know what you think as well.
I think there is also important to have some introspection today, because I think that often, for cultural reasons, we don't believe victims of sexual assault, whether they're women, whether they're men. We saw in our first trial, which, by the way, they were tried twice. The first trial hung, meaning the jury could not come to a conclusion, and in fact, about half of the jury wanted to convict them of manslaughter, which, if that were have been the case, they would have been off prison a long time ago.
I mean, this part is true. A couple of things here. First of all, I like that he's bringing up, and he goes further into depth with this and whatnot if you want to watch the whole press conference, but I like that he brings up that, victims of this are often not believed. One of the intrinsicities, is that the correct word? Like the complications, the difficulties, whatever you want to call it, with situations like this, with SA, with abuse and whatnot, is oftentimes it could be years before the victims speak out. There's so many layers to it, right? There's shame, there's this, there's that, it's so complicated. And so we see this variety of things. Are there situations, and we can look at P. Diddy right now, right? Everyone's coming out talking about, although I would have to say, right, most of these people I think are the truth, right? But unfortunately we have seen scenarios where people come out and they lie and they do this and that. And so there's this level of misbelief well, what's your motivation? You know what I'm saying? And maybe not specifically with these guys, that's a different thing because we know what their motivation would be, right? They don't want to go to prison for the rest of their life, okay? So that's obvious. Looking at other things of she was just trying to get famous, so she went to his hotel room, or she did this, or that kind of thing, okay? And absolutely, there's people that, hey, they might have been doing that. But the layers of complication when you talk about people who are willing to take advantage of another human being this way are very nuanced, and it's very tricky. And so that's the thing. And so one thing for the Menendez brothers story that's come out, or stuck out for me, and again, I operate on the basis of I do believe that they were abused, is that they have brought a voice to this, right? Now, granted, when I say they spoke out quickly, I mean they spoke out quickly after they were called. You know what I mean? But if what they say is true, and again, I think it was, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, they were kind of trapped, right? Yeah, technically they were adults, but I mean, it's almost have you ever met people who are stunted development or stunted, I don't know what the proper word for it, failure to launch type scenarios or whatever? I mean, I don't think these guys would really know if they were back then or whatever, how to get away from their parents. When you're that dependent on that kind of money and stuff like that. Now if Lyle had gone and done his whole thing, but Erik, I mean, he was trapped, you know what I'm saying? Again, does that make it right what they did? No. Okay, I'm not trying to say that either. But I think the imprisonment, the claustrophobia, the inescapableness of the scenario can not warrant what they did, but it gives me a little light into okay, I'm kind of seeing the mentality of how am I ever going to get away with this, or how am I ever going to get away from this, right? If you're operating on the belief of okay, they lied, they made it up, it's complete false, well then, it almost worked for them, right? Because they were able to get up there and get half the jury to believe them and not want them to get convicted of the worst thing. And I also think that therein lies a huge thing with this case, is that first jury, when they heard the whole story, was they were deadlocked, right? And then the second jury, with the very specific boundaries, were oh no, it's obvious, our only choice is murder. And so, well, it's murder. Now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to him answer just a couple of questions, and then we'll move on to some other forms of media that we're going to cover.
Those are really completely entirely up to the parole board. Please, we'll try.
What was the factor that made the final decision? You said the final decision was just made. Was it the letter? Was it the Menudo confession? What was it that put you over the top to make?
No, what it was is I was evaluating the arguments that were being made within my office, both pro and against.
Okay, a couple of things. So first of all, that dude who's doing that right there, him and the DA guy will go at it, and the DA guy's you're interrupting, and he's everyone's interrupting, and he'll keep asking him about the re-election thing, and the DA dude's if you want to talk about re-election, meet me in the hallway when this is done, okay? But this is not the place for it, because the person, I might put it in here, or might have put it in here. She asked him about that the next question, and he's no, that's not this at all. But also I felt this was a very typical political non-answer, right? Because you heard the options that the dude listed off, where he's what put you over the edge? The Menudo confession. If you're unfamiliar with this case, one of the guys from the band Menudo came forward and said, that he drugged and SA'd him. Well, you already see all the stuff going down in Hollywood these days. Can you imagine what it was like before social media was out there and people could tell on each other? I mean, it was probably the Wild Wild West, right? So again, that just gives more validity than yeah, I'm sure. But that answer, I was evaluating the answers, both pro and con. Well, yeah, really? You know what I'm saying? No, we didn't guess that. He wouldn't say that one thing. So, that's where I'm kind of like, I want to know too, like, what specifically was it? I get there's probably several things going on there, but I did not like his answer for that.
Why did you decide not to go with the reduced voluntary manslaughter?
That was part of the process that I was still going through up until a couple hours ago. I don't believe that a manslaughter would have been the appropriate charge given the premeditation that was involved in the murders. I believe that these were clearly murders that were premeditated. Now, the motivation, that's where, differences of opinion come up, but I didn't think it would be appropriate to go all the way down to manslaughter.
I mean, and I'll agree with him here. And he says this very well, I don't know the right word right now, but it's the motivation that becomes the thing, because he's not denying premeditated. You can't get around that, right? I mean, 100%, okay? I mean, the brothers admit this. They tell the story what they did. It's why they did it, okay? That kind of a thing or whatever. And the brothers talking about, well, this specific thing we really thought we were going to be down for or done for with the father and whatnot. So on this level, I do feel like the DA is being fair and not just completely sugarcoating it. And it's like, yeah, what they did, it was premeditated, it was brutal, it was horrific, right? But again, bringing light to the motivation is what he's looking at. And I'm, piecing it all together, he has enough information on his side to make up his personal mind of, what, I feel like their motivation was justified, although I don't agree with what exactly they did to justify getting away from their situation.
We appreciate what they did while they were in prison. While I disapprove of the way they handle their abuse, we hope that they not only have learned, which appears that they have, but that if they get reintegrated into our community, that they continue to do public good.
And again, I think with the Menendez brothers, do I personally think they'll reoffend like that? No. Do I think that they have a mega support system set up for them to be successful? Yes. This is one of the things that this brings into play when you talk about rehabilitation, things of this nature. What's that word? Like when you go back out and get arrested and probably I can read this. I can't say it. You know what I'm talking about. And you look at privilege and you look at access and you look at agency and things of this nature. So here's these two dudes. I mean, they come from a very wealthy family, not just, they're direct parents and whatnot, but I mean, they come from a good family of seemingly good people. They're married, they have all this stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? So they have all this access to this privilege and whatnot. But then when you sit here and talk about other people who don't have that kind of stuff, who might have done just as well as they did behind bars and have really changed their life and helped others, and then get out and they don't have this set up, right? And ABC happens, they end up doing something and they're right back in or whatever. So that's one of the areas that I feel like with the judicial system that, that's such as life too, right? It's almost like the whole thing of like, do you got money? Well, then you can get out of trouble. That kind of a thing, that privilege that comes with wealth and all that type of stuff in the judicial system. So these guys are very fortunate. If they get out, they've got that. Not everybody has that, right? And that determines the fate of a lot of people. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look over a couple of articles, and these are just talking about the Clemency stuff and go a little bit deeper into that narrative taking place with this. Now the first article, you're going to see the thing on the screen here. It says LA County District Attorney sends letters requesting clemency for the Menendez brothers, and this is by Matthew Friedman. This was updated on October 31st. This is CNN. Let's go ahead and get into the little article itself. So at the top here you see again CNN says LA District Attorney George strongly suggests Erik and Lyle Menendez's bid for clemency and has written letters on behalf of each brother to California Governor Gavin Newsom, he announced Wednesday. Now we're going to jump down to the fourth paragraph here. We're going to read the letters here in a second, so that's why we're going to skip over the little highlights of them because we'll go over them. But it says CNN has reached out to the brothers' attorney Mark Gagaros to confirm a formal clemency request has been sent to the governor's office. Newsom's office declined to comment on the case, saying pending clemency applications are confidential and we're not able to discuss individual cases. If approved by the governor, the Menendez brothers could see their sentence life in prison without the possibility of parole reduced, or they could be released immediately. So Again, major, right? Let's go ahead and get into some of those and read the particulars of them. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start off on the LA County District Attorney's Office website, and we're going to look at his press release of the clemency thing. So you'll see here on the screen, it says October 30th, DA Gascon supports request for clemency from Governor Gavin Newsom for Erik and Lyle Menendez. And the media thing goes down here below. It says DA Gascon announced that he supports the ask for clemency from Governor Gavin Newsom and the immediate release of the Menendez brothers. LA County DA George Gascon today announced that he supports Menendez brothers' request for clemency from Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, it just gives a little paragraph beneath that. Again, we're going to read them specifically, so we'll skip over this for now. We'll go down to the little thing here underneath that says the request for clemency was submitted October 28th by Erik and Lyle Menendez's defense team, and the DA's office has sent letters of support to Governor Newsom. The matter will now be reviewed by Governor Newsom for consideration. And then it just goes into some of the little updates, whatnot, below that. So now let's go ahead and get into those specific letters. You'll see on the screen here, I put the letter up. We're going to go over Lyle's first. And this is from, obviously, you see the letterhead from his office. It's to the Honorable Gavin Newsom. And we'll just go down here to the first paragraph of the letter. And it says, I write in strong support of Lyle Menendez's petition for clemency submitted to your office on October 28th, 2024. Mr. Menendez is currently 56 years old, serving his 34th year in prison at the R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility. August 20th, 1989, 21 years old, Mr. Menendez participated with the co-defendant and brother, Erik, in the homicide of their parents, Kitty and José Menendez, as they sat on the family's couch watching TV and eating. Both Erik and Lyle fired shotguns at their parents, striking them multiple times and taking their lives. Mr. Menendez was sentenced at the age of 26 to life without parole. At the time of the offense, there were credible allegations that Lyle was the victim of and physical abuse by the hands of his father, Jose. The LA County Probation Report prepared in connection to the criminal case documented the ongoing molestation Lyle Menendez allegedly suffered at the hands of his father until he was 8 years old. During his 34 years of incarceration, Mr. Menendez has worked hard to transform his life. He has participated in rehabilitation, including earning his associate's degree in sociology from Southwestern College. Lyle graduated from the University of California, Irvine with his Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology. Let's go on to the next page here. It says, in addition to continuing his education, Lyle created 4 new programs within the R.J. Donovan prison to assist his fellow inmates. These include Green Space, Rehabilitation through Beautification, Adverse Childhood Experience and Rehabilitation, and Youth Life Without Parole Ally. Additionally, Lyle created and wrote the Wire Bulletin, an inmate advisory bulletin for the purpose of communicating inmate advisory council matters to the inmate population. Current statistics indicate a total of 36% of people serving life without parole in California are currently over 50 years old. These individuals are not eligible for elderly parole or compassionate release. Yet most people serving a life without parole sentence are classified as low risk according to the California State Assessment. Mr. Menendez's CSRA score and classification score are the lowest levels possible for someone serving a sentence of life without parole. Our office has communicated with several family members regarding resentencing in this matter. All family members except for Mr. Milton Anderson, Kitty Menendez's brother, support commutation. Mr. Menendez's current age of 56 has 34 years spent in custody, low CSRA, low classification scores, and his dedication to rehabilitation make him an exemplary candidate for clemency. Now he just goes on to list his contact information and ask him to reach out if he has questions. So you see all the things here that Lyle has accomplished and done while being behind bars. I mean, that's quite a lot going on. Now, one thing I think is interesting in this is reading these statistics where they're like, look, you know what, when these people get to be a certain age, you know, they can't do this, they can't do that. Now, again, it depends on what the crime is, right? Some of these people, it's like, well, did the victim get to do this at this age? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you start talking about someone who has done something completely heinous to an absolutely innocent bystander, or like 100%, you know, whatever the case is, so many of these cases we follow, it's not a question. They're never gonna, you know, Susan Smith. I mean, come on, right? The fact that she even has parole, I mean, please. Okay, I mean, come on. And again, this all hinges on if a person believes what the motivation was for the brothers, as well as do they believe the allegations. Now let's move on to his letter that he did for Erik as well. Now you'll see the same type letter put up here, and what we're going to do is just skip down to the third paragraph where it gets into the specifics, because it's just repetitive before that. So it says, Mr. Menendez, and again this is about Erik. Mr. Menendez was sentenced at age 23 to life without parole. At the time of the offense, there were credible allegations that Erik Menendez was the victim of and physical abuse at the hands of his father, Jose. The LA County Probation Report prepared in connection to the criminal case documented the ongoing molestation Erik Menendez suffered at the hands of his father, starting at age 6 and continuing through his adolescent years. At age 12, it was alleged that Jose began sodomizing his son, Erik Menendez. The SA continued to occur once every few months up until the homicide. So there you go. They each have a little bit of a different story going on there. Now it says the next paragraph here is going to go into the things that he's done as well. So let's just see what Erik has accomplished as well as his time in prison. And it says during his 34 years of incarceration, Mr. Menendez has worked hard to transform his life. He participated in a rehabilitation. He earned his associate's degree in sociology. In May of 2022, he earned his certificate in proficiency in American Sign Language from Southwestern College. It's reported that Erik obtained the certification in order to better communicate with the hearing impaired individuals who are participating in the programs he has created. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. In May 2023, Erik was accepted to the University of California, Irvine. Let's just move on to that second page now. At the top here it says, in continuing with his education, Erik created 5 new programs within the R.J. Donovan Prison to assist inmates. The Life Care and Hospice Connection Program, Victim Impact and Victim Empathy for Vulnerable Populations, 12-Step and Meditation Class, Insight Meditation Workshops, and the Starlight Peace Project. So one thing that sticks out to me, I mean, these are like different things in his brother or whatever, right? And you also kind of see like the differences. You see how like more like the vibe of the two brothers and whatnot that come through in the causes that they're doing and everything. Not saying one's better than the other, it's just of interest, the differences. Now let's go on to that last little thing here. It also goes into talking about, you know, the same percentages of people with life without parole sentences and whatnot. And then beneath that, it goes on to say the same thing about the family being at support, except for Kitty's brother, their uncle, Mr. Milton Anderson. And it just goes on also that last thing to say he's 54 years old. Remember, he's a couple of years younger than his brother. Spent 34 years in custody. His low CSRA, low classification scores, and his dedication to rehabilitation make him an exemplary candidate for clemency. And then George goes on, the DA goes on to, you know, give his contact information for Governor Newsom. So those are the 2 letters that were that were written in support and whatnot. Again, I think that they're exploring all different avenues of this. I personally will be surprised if the governor does the clemency thing. I really will. You just don't usually see that, right? And for something that has this level of premeditation and brutality to it, I think that the governor I would be shocked if he did it, right? Yes, the brothers have done a lot behind bars. Yes, it does appear that they suffered at the hands of their parents, so that is definitely a mitigating factor. But again, I mean, you know, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but just, you know, how we see these things usually play out. That's why I think the governor is going to let it fall to the hands of the parole board, and it will be more structured and more like, okay, well, we're going to parole you, but, you know, you have to do boom, 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 and that kind of a thing. So if the governor lets him out, okay, I'll be surprised. So we'll see what happens. So I think it's interesting. We rarely see a DA come out this hardcore, right? They usually just are like, even these cases that we watch where it's obvious that corruption went on and that the person is behind bars innocent, and the DA is just like, nope, I don't want to hear it. Let them sit there and rot. And you're just like, huh? So for this, where it's like no question, but again, you heard what he said, it's all about the motivation, right? It's not a question about the brutality, it's not a question about the premeditated, it's not a question about if they did it or not. Okay, so that being said, I know this is another long video, so if you're still here, I do appreciate you hanging out. Let me know what you think about the questions I asked along the way and whatnot. And again, if, you know, depending on when you're seeing this, like if a decision has not come down yet, I'm curious to see what you think. Do you think they'll get the clemency? Do you think it'll fall back to the state? Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Also, while you're down there, if you could drop off some sofas for myself, Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke who are running around playing, and all the other Sofa Squad families, so we have a place to hang out in the comment section, discuss this case and all the other ones we do talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we meander our way down there to do all that, we'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. Also, if you're looking for merch, be sure to check out my Teespring store. I'll put that up here. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.